So this video we're going to be doing the first stage of the shoot 'em up game, which is to move this rectangle from side to side using either the left and right keys or the A and D keys. This is the equivalent of, if I can just find it, the Kids Can Code tutorial, which is at this link here in YouTube. This is basically what this part does in just 12 minutes. It will take us considerably longer than that to do it in MonoGame, but shows you what we'll be up to, and it's well worth having a look through and watching this video. Now we're going to need to use the command prompt. So there is an easier way of getting to it on Windows than is normally available. If you go to my Pastebin account here, I didn't write this registry editing file myself. I did find it somewhere, and whoever wrote it, I'm eternally grateful. But there's the link for it. So we're going to need this to be setting up our MonoGame thing. So what you do here is to go down to where it says raw paste data, click, press Ctrl A to select everything, Ctrl C to copy, and then open some kind of text editor. This is Notepad++. Ctrl V to paste it in, and now we're going to save it. One thing that's worth doing, if I just minimize that and minimize that for a moment, is that I've already prepared myself a folder in the C drive called ShmupTutorial, and inside there I've put 3 subfolders, one for Love2D, one for MonoGame, and one for Pygame. In the MonoGame one, I've created a blank folder called Shmup, which has got nothing in it at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll save this file that we've got here probably into that folder. So if we go save as, we're in the MonoGame folder, let's save it there. So save it as, I'll just put it as command.reg for reg file. So it's not a text file, it's a registry editing file. Save it. Now we can close that, we don't need it. And I've got command reg in there. Double click it, you'll get the admin warning popping up. And this warning, adding information, blah, blah, blah. Yes, we do want to continue. It then comes up with a second one that it can't import certain parts of it. That's no problem. It always comes up. I don't know why. Now, the purpose of doing that is now in a Windows Explorer terminal, and if I right click, I've got now command prompts, normal and elevated, PowerShell prompts, normal and elevated. So, and this occurs whichever folder you're in, wherever you are. So it's a very convenient way of getting those command prompts in. Now, I will close this off now. This is one that was pre-compiled, so we don't need that. So we're now going to actually create a MonoGame project. If you've not used MonoGame before, then there's certain things you'll need to do to get it running. We'll start with the Visual Studio installer, which I'll bring across. So I'm assuming you've installed Visual Studio. If not, just download it and install it, because you can see I've got both 2019 and 2022 here. We can use 2022, that's no problem at all. And I'll show you by pressing the modify button, so that if you're just downloading it for the first time and you're not quite sure what to put in, then you need mobile development with .NET, the .NET desktop development, and the Universal Windows platform. This is reflected in, if I go to the setting up the development thing in MonoGame's documents here. Again, I'll put that into the description, so it tells you what's needed in Visual Studio. Obviously they're talking about 2019 here, so they do mention this one, .NET Cross-Core Platform Development. It doesn't exist in the 2022 version, but it doesn't matter as long as you've got these three: Universal Windows, .NET Desktop, and Mobile Development, which is these three here. That's all you need. Obviously, I've already installed, so you would have the install, and then once you've done that, then that's ready to go. So I'll close that one. Now we don't need to launch Visual Studio just yet. In fact, we will now shut that off. We're going to do some changes to the installation of Visual Studio, especially if you've not done it before. For this, you will need an elevated command prompt or elevated PowerShell, whichever you prefer. So again, we get the Windows warning, and here it is. So as you can see, it's got administrate up there, so it knows what we're doing. The first thing you'll need to do is to install the pipeline editor. So I'll just right click and paste this in. I will put this again, these series of commands in. You only need to do this once per machine, per computer. I've already done it, so it's going to come up with some errors. So what we're doing is we're installing the MGCB-Editor. This is the MonoGame. I'm not quite sure what this stands for, but it allows you to pipeline the assets you're using, sounds, video, pictures, etc., and put them in. So if I press enter there, it tells me it's already installed, so no problem. Once you've done that, there's a second command, which again I will right click and paste in, and that is to register that editor. Again, it'll probably come up with an error. Oh, it's done, no problem. Now the final thing you'll need to do is to make sure that you've got the templates for MonoGame installed. So this is the third and final one that you'll need, and this is .NET New install MonoGame.Templates.CSharp. Now I've already done it, but it will just overwrite what's already there. So if I press enter, and it gives me a list of the templates that have been put in. So these allow you to use Visual Studio for creating all these different applications. The ones you'll probably use most is the this one here, cross-platform OpenGL, and this one here, Windows DirectX for Windows only. So we've now done the installation, which you only need to do once. Now we're now going to create a new project. I'll close this admin window. So first thing to do, make sure you're in whichever folder that you're going to start doing your stuff in. So I've created this empty folder called Shmup, and this is where I want to create my MonoGame project. So just using, you can use just the normal command prompt this time. We don't need the elevated. And then I want to use the cross-platform one. So let me just put that in. Again, I'll put this right. So it's .NET New, and then this one here is one of those shortcuts that we saw earlier that gives the type of distribution. So this is MonoGame.Desktopgl for the OpenGL. The -O, I'm not sure what it does, and then you give the name of the project that you want to create. Now you'll notice that we're already in MonoGame Shmup, so this will create a second folder here called Shmup with all the stuff in it. So if I press the enter key now, there we are, that's done, and you'll see we've now got a new Shmup folder in there with all this stuff already in it. Now it's not a full solution yet, it is a project. So that means that we can now open it in Visual Studio and create it. So let me just pause for a second while I get Visual Studio up and running. Okay, so here's the Visual Studio starting up thing. We don't need this anymore, so we can close that down. Now what we're going to do is open a project or solution and then go to the one that we have just created. So we're inside ShmupTutorial Monogame Shmup Shmup, and we've got this csproj file there. So we open that, and you can see it's everything that we need is created here. The only thing we haven't done is to save the solution. So if we go to File, Save All, and it's now asking us to create the solution file. Don't put it here, go up one. So you're outside the second of the shmup folders, and then call it what you like with the SLN file and save. So if we go back to the desktop, you'll now see that we've got our ShmupTutorial Love2D Monogame Pygame. Inside there we've got Shmup. We don't need that anymore, that can be deleted. And then we've got inside there we've got the Shmup solution and this folder there. So it's kind of everything is where you'd expect it to be. If you wish to move those around to other places, you can do. You just need to restart the Visual Studio. So that's everything in place and will actually run. So this will appear on my other screen. I'll just drag it across. So there's our window. It's all running. Now there's one other thing that we need to do before continuing, and that is to go to the Tools, NuGet Package Manager. So it's this middle one. That will show you what's already installed, which is the MonoGame Content Builder and Framework. Go to the Browse one and type in MonoGame again. And what we're looking for is MonoGame Extended. There we go, MonoGame Extended. So it adds some extra stuff that MonoGame on its own doesn't have. Click on Project Shmup and install. That should have done it now. Okay, so now you can see we've got a whole bunch of different files. It annoys me slightly that these are all grouped in with the project Explorer, and we can close that now. But I've tried moving them, I've tried doing things with them, but I don't really have much success. You can fiddle about with the solutions and available views and that kind of thing to get rid of this, but in the end you just kind of accept that it's there. So that adds some extra capabilities that we need. So if I start with game.c1, there we are. Now we've got this namespace, of course, Shmup, because that's what we created the project under, and this is the default thing that was put in there, which allows it all to run. So the next thing to do is to copy the files that I've already created for this version. Rather than typing it all in from the start, you can use my GitHub pages for that. So we'll just pause for a second while I find those, and then I'll show you what to do next. Right, so here's my GitHub page for using Pygame, Love2D and MonoGame. At the moment I've only got 2 episodes up there, but I will be adding them over the next few days. So we're going to be doing episode 1, which is Move Player. Click on the MonoGame, and I've got, as you can see, 4 files here. If we start with this one here, this is Shmup main CS. So if I click on it, That's the equivalent of, if we go back to Visual Studio, this game1.cs. It's entirely up to you whether you want to leave it as game1 or whether you want to rename it. Let me rename this. Let's call it Shmup main, which I think is what I called it in the first place. It'll then come up, are we renaming it? Do we want to rename everything? Yes, we do. There we are. So we're now at Shmup main. Now, if you go back to my file here, you'll see that we've got the namespace Shmup and Shmup main. So if you do call it Shmup main, then you can simply Control A, Control C to copy, and then go back to your game, Control A, delete, Control V, and we've now put in my version there. Now there's probably some stuff in here that, you know, look, that shouldn't be in here. Let's get rid of that. So it's coming up with a lot of errors at the moment, probably because we've got a lot of stuff in the top here which is not required. Let's get rid of all that. That looks more like it. So we've got the usings in here, and we've got this. Now the reason we've got an underline here is that there's a missing couple of classes which are on here. If I just go back to, we've got the shared class and the player class. So if we go to the shared class first of all, now this is again, you can do Control A. Actually, let's do that slightly differently because I accidentally last time got all of the stuff up here which I didn't want. So let's kind of highlight that. Control C, that's better. You can of course download the entire distribution, but it's probably just easier to select the individual ones here. So we'll go back. So we now want a new class. So we'll add, what do we want? That will be on here. That'll be add class. And we'll call this one shared. And then again, we can delete everything and paste in. So we've now got my shared class in there. Let's go back to this one. So we've lost some of the red underscores. We've now only got the player underlined because we haven't got a player. So let's do, while we're at it, let's do a new class called player. Add class. Player.cs. Add, OK. And then we'll come back and exactly the same as we did before. Player. We'll select everything. There we go. Control C. Back to this. Delete. Control V. Right, so we've got that in, so we should now have got rid of all the red lines. Yes, we have. Save it, and with a bit of luck, it should run. Make sure you have got MonoGame extended added, like I showed you at the beginning of this video. Right, there we go. Let's bring that across, and that's now working perfectly. So there's a couple of changes that we need to do. This rectangle here, to fit in with the Python and the Love2D ones, needs to be the other way around. So we'll close that off. Let's reduce that a bit. Don't need that. Now the way this one works is that from this main we are loading in. I can find where it is. It should be a load content. There it is. Right, so we've got here player create player. So let's go to the player class. Now this, you'll notice, is a static class. Assuming that you're not familiar with C# and this is perhaps you're just trying this out for the first time, this is very similar to the Python's code module, where you can't create objects of type player. It's just a static class. It's like a repository for all kinds of variables which you can read and write directly to, and you can run various methods from it. So the create player, which is this one here, which was running in the load content, is what will now create the player. So if I just quickly go back to where it was going to do that. So as soon as you hit the play button, the first thing that runs is this load content. Now this is part of the monogame distribution. You're overriding the load content function and adding your own stuff to it, but this is essential to the game starting, as is the update and draw. So this is similar to Love2D, that it has these kind of load, update and draw functions that run. This one runs on startup and these two run 60 times a second. So we're loading the content. We want to create the player. So we'll now go back to player, and it's using the rectangle F class, which is part of monogame extended. So it allows you to create a rectangle just as a kind of a data structure. As you can see, I've created it with 0x, 0y, and then 50 by 40. So in fact, I want that the other way around. I want that 40 by 50 to make a vertical one. Now the starting position, which is position, is now set to the width of the window, which is 480, which is in turn has been set here. So we've got a public static constant, really, that should be read only perhaps. Which is similar to a constant. There we go. So that's the height and width of the whole system there. And then we've got a game state menu here, which is very simple. So that's all that's required at this point. So if we come back to player, so this sets the position of the rectangle at the height and width of the screen, kind of divided in half to give it in the center, but 10 up from the bottom of the screen. So that's why it stays in that one place. Let's see. We've actually set it to color.green, which is not as green as you might like it. As you can see, the green color there, I don't know whether this will show on the video, but it's got red 0, green 128 and blue 0. So it's actually only half the sort of brightness that it should be. It is pure green, but it's only half the brightness. It should be at 255. So that's because we're using a built-in color. That might be something that we can adjust by using a custom color. So we can deal with that when we're ready. So let's hit that and see whether that has worked. Yep, let's bring this across. So you can now see that our rectangle is sitting upright. So that's good. So what I'd like to do is change that to bright green so that it matches the other Love2D and Pygame versions. Right, so let's add a better color. So it probably would be sensible to put it in the shared area there so that we can use it throughout the entire project. So let's add it under here. So we'll have it as public, meaning that it can be used by the whole project. It has to be static because we're in a static class. Now we don't want a string. Sometimes this AI is a bit too clever. We want a color. Helps if you spell it correctly. Color, there we go. And then we want let's call it green in capital letters. Yep, and then we'll make it equal to a new color. And then we'll make it 0, 2, 5, 5, 0, and a semicolon. Now it's grumbling about color. Show fixes. MonoGame XLA framework should do it. Yep. Let me just check what else we've got in there. Might be worth putting in the extended as well while we're at it. Okay, we're not actually using extended just yet, but anyway, we've now got our color has been set up. Actually we don't need that. Let's clear that out. So we're getting the color not from the built-in C# system, but from Microsoft's XLA framework, which is the part of the MonoGame setup. So we've now got our new color. So if we go back to the player, and then where it's got color green is we can now put that as shared. Oops, if you spell it correctly, that helps. And then this should come up. Yeah, there it is. Look, green. So we've now changed the color of the rectangle. So again, let's hit play and see what happens there. There we are, that's better. So we've now got a bright green rectangle moving backwards and forwards. So close that off. So that's the MonoGame equivalent of the of that first. We'll go back to here of this tutorial here, where he's moving the green rectangle across the screen, but we're now doing it in MonoGame. Just a brief rundown of how this works. The MonoGame uses these, let me just squeeze those together for a bit. It uses the load content here to load anything in, so you can create all your objects and game objects and graphics and sounds and get it all loaded in here. Then 60 times a second we get, first of all, the update function runs here. Now what I'm doing here is I'm getting the keyboard state and then checking whether quit has been selected. So for example, if we run this again, if I hit that button there, then the quit one will run here. So, and then we're exiting from it. That's done by this function called process events, which is one that I wrote in. So it starts off with a quit being false, and then if you're using a gamepad and you press the back button, or if you're using a keyboard and you've pressed the escape key, then quit is true and it returns the keyboard state. Now, if you're a Python or Lua user, you'll be familiar with being able to return multiple variables. C# can do it, but it's quite difficult. We want to return two things. We want to return the current state of the keyboard. We also want to return whether quit is true or false. C# has this nifty little out thing here, which you put into the parameters of the function. So we're calling out bool quit here. And what happens is when you set the value of quit, as we've done here, it goes to the quit that's passed as a parameter here and comes out again here. So it's a bit weird, but it's kind of the similar as if we could do it to, as you would in Python, you would put return quit, comma, keyboard get state, or keyboard get state, comma, quit. But you can't do that in C#. You can only have this sort of out one variable and return another variable. You can return a tuple of variables, but you then have to unpack the tuple at the other end, and it all gets very complicated. So this is probably the closest we can get to the Lua and Python multiple return of values. So basically we're just getting the state of the keyboard, whether the user has clicked the close button, and if they have, then we exit, and if they haven't, we then continue to update the game. So this is dt, which is delta time. So we're getting it from the passed in game time and changing it to seconds. So delta time in Love2D is in seconds. In Pygame it's milliseconds. So in all the different variations that I've done, I've changed it to match Love2D by keeping it in seconds. So that changes it to a fraction of a second rather than the milliseconds that it is in by default. And then we're passing that delta time up to the player. And then the base update is any other stuff that is part of the main game, which we've inherited from here. So player update, what that does is it checks the position changes the position of our rectangle by finding out which key has been pressed, keys left or keys A, keys right or keys D, and then either increasing or decreasing, that's decreasing the speed there, multiply by delta time, so that it does that 60 times a second and moves the rectangle accordingly. And then if the width of the if the X position of the rectangle exceeds the width of the window minus the width of the rectangle itself, then it will be set to that, so that it will stop as soon as it reaches the right hand edge, or on the left hand edge if it becomes less than 0, so it starts to disappear past the window, then it's set back to 0. So that's basically how that works. So in the update function we are just altering the position of the rectangle. So if I get that started up again just to show you, there we go, so that's on the thing here. So if I press the left hand key here, it will change the position of the X coordinate of the rectangle by this amount, and if it goes right over to the edge here, then it will turn it back to 0. So I'm pressing the left key, continuously now, held down, does nothing because this is working. I can just move that back slightly. If I now put a stop point in there and we continue to run the game, so I'm going to press the key here until it hits that edge, and then this point here will show us what's happening. So if I press the key, okay, it's gone off screen and we're stopped at this point here. So we've now got the rectangle X is actually at -1, well, a very low number by the looks of it. So we're now going to change it to 0 by pressing F11. And that puts rectangle X back to 0, 540 by the width and height, which is 40 wide, 50 height. So that's how that works. Okay, I think that's enough for this session. We've managed to start a game running in MonoGame. As I do each of the different Pygame and Love2D, I'll explain different parts of the way that the game engines all have in common and what they do. So hopefully between the three of them we should cover most things. So it's probably, although you can see all the code here and kind of copy it and write it in yourself, it's probably more sensible just to download it from the GitHub and set it up like I showed you here. And then as we proceed through the next stages, you can simply add the new bits of code to this baseline as you go, so that at least you've got a starting point where you're not typing in absolutely everything. Okay, so we'll be doing episode 2 next time.